Hi, Jim Van Zandt here, one of the pastors at Carlisle United Methodist Church with Sermon in 3 Minutes. I want to thank you for tuning in today. Last week, Father's Day, we began a new series of messages called What Does God Expect? It's a look at the Ten Commandments over a 3-week period of time. And we're kind of introducing them on Father's Day because we look at them as a father talking to his children. Here we have this condensed version, the 10 things that God wants us to do and be as we live in relationship with Him and in relationship with each other. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, and I would urge you to do that, you can Google it or open a Bible to Exodus chapter 20, the first 17 verses. You're probably familiar with most of them. But one of the things you might notice is that the first 4 commandments have to do with our relationship with God, and the remaining 6 have to do with our relationship with each other. They're just instructions about how to live successfully with God and with each other. And certainly we would all do well to read them once in a while to remind and refresh ourselves with these. And that's what we're doing over the next 3 weeks. So last week we looked at the first 4 of those commandments. God wants us not to put any other God above Him. God wants us not to make idols out of anything. God wants us not to take His name in vain. And God wants us to remember a Sabbath, to remember that there's a rhythm to life. You know, for the Old Testament Israelites, having God as their God, Yahweh, Jehovah, was something, their only God, was something that was much different than their neighbors. They had polytheistic gods. But the people and children of Israel were to have only one God. That's one of the things that made them distinctive. And they weren't to make any idols. They weren't to make any objects. They weren't to worship anything that God had created, anything at all. And they weren't to take His name in vain. You know, the name in the Hebrew word was just as valuable to you as your arm or your leg. It defined everything about you. And so misusing someone's name was the same as misusing them. And God wants to have a special place in our lives and doesn't want that place to be crowded out by an idol, nor does He want to be misused by us. And the last thing, reminding us that there's a rhythm to life, sacredness about our lives, and that when we get out of rhythm with life, we can get out of rhythm in a whole lot of other aspects of our lives. Just living our lives reminds us of that. So why don't you, sometime over this next week, if you haven't in a long time, why don't you open the Scriptures, familiarize yourself with the 10 Commandments, and just remember that these are instructions from a father to his children. Thanks for tuning in, Sermon in 3 Minutes. See you next week.